You are live. Welcome to the Shoy Show. It is Wednesday, August 12th, 2026. We only get one of these. I hope you have some dreams. If you don't have some dreams, write them down. If you don't have dreams, go get some paper, go get a pen, write them down, read them to yourself every single day. I want to monetize this channel. I have targets on all platforms. I will record, go live daily. I will post at least 3 videos a day. Now I'm posting 5. I have all of my targets. I will get 1 million views monthly. Right now I'm over 500,000. Breaking targets. I actually have 500 to 1 million views monthly. And I already broke the lower part of that threshold. You better have targets. Weight loss, books, businesses, whatever it is, money. You better have targets. If you don't have targets, you don't know what you're aiming for. All right, let's start off with our daily devotional. We start off with God because I love God and I wouldn't be doing this show and I wouldn't be here without him. So that's what we're going to start with. Don't worry, God will do justice. Injustice hurts. Especially when we are unjustly accused, forgotten, or betrayed by those we love. But God remains fair, faithful, and attentive. The word states, God is a just judge. Psalm 7:11. He doesn't fail or forget, but acts perfectly at the right time. Our mission is to trust, not to take revenge. Joseph was a victim of injustices, but remained firm. God not only exalted him, but also used all pain to fulfill a greater purpose. This teaches us that divine justice does not fail. She may take a long time in our eyes, but she always comes at the right time. When we try to do justice with our own hands, we wear ourselves out. But when we deliver it into God's hands, he acts with power, honor, and truth. His justice is complete, public, and glorifies the name of the Lord. Trust, rest, and live with integrity, because God will justify it. Have you ever trusted God or tried to do justice with your own hands? I know I have, and it's futile. Because if you trust in God, you trust in the Lord, you got nothing to worry about. He will take care of everything. God's justice comes at the right time, without flaws, and with eternal purpose. That was our daily devotional. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, what can I say? You want your money back? I don't know. I don't know what to do. No refunds. All right, let's get on with it. Because you know what our first topic is? It's my gripe of the day. Yeah. Now, I'm talking to everyone out there. Yeah, I'm talking to my friends. I'm talking to my family. I'm talking to everyone that needs to hear this. I'm talking to humanity. This comes from someone that has smoked and drank for the better part of his life. You will never reach your full potential. It is an impossibility. Yes, we're talking about life without substances. And to be honest, you're too old for this. If you're in your 30s, I don't know what you're doing, drinking, smoking. You want to do it every once in a while? That's your prerogative. Do whatever you want to do. I'm not demanding anything from anyone. I'm just saying that if you don't have goals, that if you aren't working on something adjacent to smoking, to drinking, to enjoying yourself, I don't know that that's a life worth living. This hedonistic life where all you're seeking is pleasure. I'm not saying you have to be a workhorse either. But what I am saying is that if you're going to complain about something, you better be justified in doing so. Like, if you're going to complain about money, you can complain and bitch about anything. That's what we do all day. We are human beings. I'm not going to fight you on that. That's what I do all day. I complain, bitch, and moan. Anybody in my circle will tell you that. But what I am saying is, if you're complaining about money, but doing nothing about it, not trying to go get the incremental dollar, if you're not hustling to get out of your job and get a better one, if you're complaining that, or you're admiring someone that has a great body, but you don't have an exercise regimen, if you're not eating healthy, when's the last time you saw or heard someone that was intelligent, especially someone that you admired, some Fortune 500 CEO, Elon Musk, whoever it is? When's the last time you heard someone intelligent that does not read? Is reading part of your daily regimen? And for those of you that have kids and you're trying to instill this type of ethos into them, how are you backing it up? Are you going to the gym? You're making sure that they're active. Are you reading every day? You're making sure that they're doing their homework and they're up to date with their studies. Since when have you been excused from these responsibilities? This is what leads to a healthy life. And when it comes to weed and alcohol, let's just call it what it is. It is a travesty. It is to the detriment of your own health. And it doesn't matter how you look at it. Smoking weed, smoking cigarettes is ruining your health. It's smoking. You are blackening your lungs. You are making it more difficult for yourself to breathe. If you have kids in the future, you may compromise their organs. But again, I don't want to be politically correct here or walk on eggshells. It is stupid. And I can't say it enough. Let this be a reminder that we have to quit. We have to stop smoking. We have to stop drinking. You will never reach your full potential. And don't look at some artists and romanticize them like Eminem, any of these rappers, any of these actors and actresses, Seth Rogen, Bill Maher. Oh, they smoke every day. And look at them. They have successful careers. Nonsense. You will see your life flash right before your eyes. And it's time's running away from everyone anyway. Don't you want to be conscious and see it? I mean, most of us have lived either half or a quarter of our lives already. If we live to be 80 years old, I'm 36. I've lived half my life. When are you going to get off the drugs? When are you going to get off the alcohol? You will never reach your full potential. If you admire people that are fit on social media, why don't you exercise? If you admire the intelligent, read. Don't just admire the discipline, emulate it. Learn how to enjoy life without needing a substance to make the night interesting. And lastly, your life depends on gaining control over your own body. Figure it out. You are too old to be smoking. You are too old to be drinking. It is doing nothing for you. You want to have a night out? You want to smoke? You want to drink? Live your life. It's your life. I am no one to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do. But this is information. This is a wake-up call. One of the many you and I have needed. Enough. You have not lived up to your potential. If you have, and you're 80 years old already, and you don't give a shit about anything, By all means, drink and smoke until the cows come home. Watch every sunset and ride it out. But until that day comes, if you have dreams, if you have goals, if you aspire to become something else, if you've been putting so many ideas on the back burner because you've been indulging in smoking weed and drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes day in and day out, it's time for a reality check. You got to wake up and you got to figure this out. You will never break the chains until you give up these substances. It's not going to happen. Your best self, the best version of who you can be, is without drugs and alcohol. Full stop. All right, let's get into our first topic. And this topic is going to get, this is the Shoy Show, right? And if it was another show, maybe we wouldn't talk about this. I'm not trying to bait anyone. I'm not trying to piss people off. Life is short. I don't want to hurt people. That's not what God made me for. I know that for sure. I'm here to spread love and have compassion. Now, I preface this topic with those points because this is going to get really controversial and really uncomfortable. Should America allow public calls to prayer? Should we be able to pray outside? This is an extremely hot topic, and that's exactly why we're addressing it. Muslim calls to prayer are already being broadcast over outdoor loudspeakers in American cities, including New York, Minneapolis, and Dearborn, Michigan. And my question is, should that become a normal part of American life? It's certainly going to influence people. 1/5 of the world is Muslim. And before we debate this, let's establish exactly what we're talking about. This isn't necessarily Muslims conducting the entire prayer over a loudspeaker. It's the adhan, the Islamic call summoning Muslims to prayer. But this is no longer hypothetical. In New York City since 2023, mosques have been allowed to broadcast the call to prayer every Friday between 12:30 and 1:30 without a permit, as well as around sunset every evening during Ramadan, as long as they comply with the city's noise rules. In Dearborn, Michigan, multiple mosques broadcast calls to prayer outdoors. There have also been complaints from residents about hearing it inside their homes, including complaints over early morning calls. And Minneapolis changed its noise ordinance in 2023 to allow amplified calls to prayer throughout the year, including during hours when the city's previous noise rules had restricted them. So this is already happening in America. And I'm not going to sound like an alarmist because I'm not. We have to debate this. It is a topic that everyone is talking about, and you're hearing extremely disgusting remarks. So we have to address this. And I know it's a touchy topic, but that's why I even have the show to begin with. Now, I have mixed feelings about it because I'm Egyptian. I was born and raised in New York. I'm Christian. I've been to Egypt. I've been to Morocco. And I heard the Islamic call to prayer. I heard the full-on prayers. And honestly, I thought it was beautiful. I heard it 5 times a day. I loved it. And guess what? As a Christian, you know what I did? I used it as a reminder to pray myself. So I have no problem with the prayer. But guess what? Those are Muslim countries. That's part of their culture and traditions. There was something beautiful about an entire community essentially being reminded, stop what you're doing for a second and think about God. I got no problem with that. So now I'm asking the reverse question. when another religious tradition becomes more prominent in America, how much should American public culture change to accommodate it? Because that's what's happening here, right? Now, of course, my answer isn't that Muslims shouldn't be here. And the reason why I actually have to say that is because people actually say that on social media. They have the audacity and the nerve to be that racist, to divulge with those disgusting remarks. That is ridiculous. I do not believe that for 1 second. My answer also is not that Muslims should be able. My answer is also not that Muslims shouldn't be able to practice Islam. Of course they should. They are Muslim. And I'm definitely not arguing that America should force Christianity on anybody either. Legally, America is not a Christian state. The First Amendment says government cannot establish a religion and cannot prohibit the free exercise of religion. Article 6 of the Constitution also says there can be no religious test for federal public office. There's even a Treaty of Tripoli signed during the presidency of John Adams in the 1790s, which famously stated that the government of the United States was not founded on the Christian religion. So legally, this is clear. But fundamentally, we are a country built on fundamental Christian values. That is undebatable. Historically, this country has been shaped by Christianity. It influenced American culture, morality, institutions, and our traditions. That doesn't mean you have to be Christian to be American. It doesn't mean that Christian doctrine becomes American law. America eventually became one of the most religiously diverse countries on earth, and we like it that way. But you can't erase the Christian influence from American history any more than you can erase Islam's influence from the history and culture of Morocco. So here's where I struggle with this. Should accommodating religious freedom also mean changing the sounds and traditions of the American public square? I don't know that it should. I don't think anybody should be praying outside. That's why we have temples. That's why we have churches and mosques. It's supposed to be done indoors. Anytime you have any type of public display of noise, usually people will call the police for that, whether it's music or maybe even prayer. I'm not sure that we should be allowing this in this country, especially considering that we are a melting pot. Now let's watch some video here. This is Dearborn, Michigan. Again, this is the Muslim call to prayer. It's not the full prayer. So adhan is not the full prayer. It is simply the public or private announcement that it is time for a mandatory daily prayer. That's it. That time has arrived. This is also in Michigan. Again, I think this is beautiful. And when I heard it in Muslim countries, I had no problem with it. How could I? It's beautiful. It's just a reminder to pray. But again, I can totally understand the argument of it being forced on us. We don't pray as Catholics or Christians out in the open here. Now, we are going to get to church bells in a moment because that has an impact on our daily lives. But let's continue with the videos.
We're about to experience the adhan here at Masjid Dar al-Hijra. Historic moment. Welcome to Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is where history was made. This is the first major city in the United States of America where the adhan can be broadcast, meaning it can be heard outside the masjid on loudspeakers. This is the story of how Minneapolis became the first American city to pass a bill to allow adhan of all 5 prayers to be heard outside the masjid. How did this happen in America? Why did this happen in Minneapolis? Who were the people behind this? And can this happen all over the US? Historically speaking, the first masjid to be granted the right to call the adhan on loudspeakers was Masjid Dearborn, the American Muslim Society.
This masjid is the first masjid in the United States to make the call to prayer, the adhan, publicly outside. We went to the court against the city of Dearborn in 1981, and we won the case.
After that, in 2004, America's first Muslim-majority city, Hamtramck, became the second city where adhan was legalized by the local government when the noise ordinance change was put to a citywide vote. 16 years later, in 2020, the City Council of Patterson, New Jersey, authorized the call to prayer between certain hours of the day. But the difference between Dearborn, Hamtramck, Patterson, and Minneapolis is that Minneapolis is the first major U.S. city where adhan has become the law. In the Ramadan of 2020 that took place during the pandemic, Muslims of Minneapolis approached the mayor. They took the initiative and the mayor responded positively. The adhan was broadcast 5 times a day, but ended when Ramadan ended. The last year in 2022, the adhan could be broadcast, but due to the noise ordinance, only between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Okay, now, before anyone starts with the hate, let's cut that shit out, right? That is not what this topic is here for. That's not why I'm addressing this topic. I'm addressing this topic because I'm asking the question, should public prayer be allowed outdoors in the United States? Is it eating into our liberty? Is it eating into our freedom? And that's kind of a harsh way to put it. But I just don't know what to say about this because as a Christian, again, we have never prayed outdoors. And don't give me some random ass examples. Oh yeah, well, you pray outdoors over here and you have a festival over there. We're not talking about one-offs. Maybe during Ramadan, it could be accepted. And here's the thing, right? We're unique. We literally have every race around the world living in this country. When you go to other countries, they are Muslim countries. They broadcast full prayer. And we have nothing to say about that because they are Muslim countries. Do I have a problem with that? No. No one should have a problem with that. What are we based on? We are not a Christian country. But everything around us has been influenced by Christianity. And again, that is undeniable. So it's not something that we have to pay attention to. I'm just saying, why is it that Islam was the first religion to be allowed to pray or make this announcement outdoors? So should we accommodate religious freedom, which would mean changing the sounds and traditions of the American public square? Again, I don't think we should. There are too many races here, and we are overwhelmingly Christian and Catholic in this country. Approximately 65% of the United States is Christian. And we're not praying outdoors. So the reason why we have to address this is because it has been a controversial topic for some time. And instead of just saying, hey, this is jihad, the Muslims are taking over, which is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Okay, you may have stereotypes, and that's okay. But you have to thwart those. At every turn, you got to thwart those. That is not true. Islam is a religion of peace. Full stop. It always has been. Every religion on this planet Earth has done and committed egregious crimes. We have all had our past, and some of them are still committing these egregious crimes today. And honestly, that's the easy way out. Saying that Muslims are terrorists or they're going to take over the country, that's the easy way out. It's not true. There are estimates that by 2050, Muslims will make up 2.1% of the United States. So please, we don't need the xenophobia here. Let's have the debate. Now, I feel uncomfortable even saying that I don't want to change the public square, the sounds and the traditions of it, because I don't want this conversation to be interpreted as being against Muslims. That's not what this is about. Some of my closest friends are Muslims. I love them. I absolutely love them. They're far closer than I can even explain. And I've met incredible Muslim people throughout my life. God bless them a million times over. I have prayed for them. I love them. So again, let's not conflate extremism with any of this, with a religion. It's wrong and it's false. And if they were truly a bad religion, like people like to paint Islam out to be, then guess what? I think 20% of them, I think they would have dominated the world already. And we would have seen pure dystopia. So enough. Again, take that. It's not even part of the argument. The xenophobic rants, we have to put those aside. They're not even aside. We need to extinguish them. If I hated an entire group of people simply because they were Muslim or Jewish or Christian, forget about calling me a racist. Call me wrong and stupid. I'd be past that point of no return. This is about where we draw the line between religious freedom and changing public culture. And there's an obvious counter argument staring at me directly in the face. What about church bells? We ring church bells daily at every hour across America. So how can I sit here and say, I don't want an Islamic call to prayer coming through a loudspeaker while accepting church bells? That's a legitimate double standard argument. My answer is that I do see a distinction. A bell ringing is not somebody broadcasting the words of a Christian prayer throughout the neighborhood. The adhan contains an explicitly religious proclamation and summons Muslims to worship. But I'm not going to pretend the distinction completely eliminates the contradiction. Church bells are religious. We tolerate them partly because they're deeply embedded in American history and our culture. But let me make something very clear here. If churches started broadcasting Christian prayers through loudspeakers into neighborhoods, I'd oppose that too. I would say, what are they doing? There are Muslims that live here. There are people that are not part of this sect. There are atheists around. Case in point, not everyone is going to appreciate prayer. So I don't care what religion it's coming from. And this is coming from a Christian. And I love God. And I pray multiple times a day. And I would love to hear more about God. But I don't think this is good for the public. I actually think it divides us more. Because we have to respect each other's cultures and traditions. And when something's being thrown in your face, that's when people start to get upset. Now, again, maybe I'm being a little extreme in my interpretation of all of this, but from what you read and see online, there's a lot of backlash here. People don't want this, right? Not people, but there are many people that don't want this. Again, if Christian prayers were being broadcast through loudspeakers, I would say that was stupid. And I would oppose it. Because you can't subject everyone, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, atheists, and everybody else living around you to your prayer just because you're Christian. This is the United States. So I'm an equal opportunist here. I'm not talking about somebody sitting on a park bench and praying. Of course you can pray outside. individually. I'm talking about an organized religion using amplification to broadcast its religious message throughout a neighborhood. Not everyone is going to appreciate that. And if they aren't, then why introduce the idea? Why bring in yet another issue, more divide into the public forum? Imagine living here. Imagine living next to a church as a Muslim and hearing the Lord's Prayer broadcast through speakers into your home every day. Would that be respectful? No. I mean, these answers are clear cut. Imagine being Jewish. Imagine being atheist. You would be like, what the fuck? At some point, you would have to accept it, either that or you would have to move. And you don't even have to hate Christianity to say, I don't want your religion broadcast into my living room. So why wouldn't I extend exactly the same consideration to everybody else? That's why I genuinely don't understand why governments should be moving toward making amplified religious proclamations part of the public soundscape. This is why we have churches. This is why we have mosques, synagogues, temples. Go worship, practice your religion, have religious festivals, have parades, gather together. You have enormous religious freedom in this country. But why does the prayer itself need to spill out through the speakers into the surrounding neighborhood? Do we really need to hear this on the street? Now, some people are going to say, yeah, we need more God in our lives. Yeah, we need to hear it all day. I don't agree with that. Because not everybody follows your religion. And again, I'm an equal opportunist. Whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, no one wants to hear prayer. So that's where I can't agree. And maybe that's actually where separation of church and state becomes so important. Government isn't supposed to decide that Christianity wins. Government isn't supposed to decide that Islam wins. Government isn't supposed to decide that religion wins. As a matter of fact, do you remember when Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump and the Trump administration were reading the Bible? Yeah, reading the Bible in Washington, D.C. Are you kidding me? I thought that was so audacious and stupid. And yes, this country has been built on fundamental Christian values, and I thought that was so stupid. And I love the Bible. You can't do that. You need to have respect for everyone. And yes, 65% of us are Christian here in the United States, but why throw it in people's faces? This is why we have a separation of church and state. It's in our Constitution. Are we going to respect our own laws or not? I mean, seriously. Every single time we hear the Trump administration, or any administration for that matter, they just do what's convenient. I'm going to follow the law this time. I'm going to exploit it over here. No, I'm not going to follow it over here because it doesn't make sense to me. The separation of church and state protects your ability to practice your religion while remaining neutral toward what you believe. So when governments specifically change rules to accommodate amplified religious proclamations, I think it's completely legitimate for citizens to ask, why are we doing this? Why do you think we're seeing these recordings? Again, when I'm in a Muslim country, I think this is beautiful. This is the United States, y'all. And not only do we have to talk about this, but I think we gotta have a line drawn here. Everything tells me that this is wrong. It should not be happening. That's why you have the mosque. That's why you have the church. That's why you have the temple. What precedent are we creating here? And are we willing to make the same accommodation for every religion? What if churches wanted to start broadcasting prayer through loudspeakers? Then what? I mean, we do have to look at the slippery slope argument, right? I don't know why we would allow this. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe I need to be enlightened on something. This is an incredibly sensitive dynamic. One that I don't think we need to introduce into shared streets and neighborhoods. So maybe the question becomes, does equality require every religious tradition to be treated identically? Or can a country preserve long-standing cultural traditions without discriminating against newer ones? That's a difficult question. Because legally, government has to remain neutral toward religion. The Constitution protects non-Christian religions too. And that's where my personal preference and the constitutional question can diverge. Personally, I don't think we should normalize broadcasting organized prayer throughout neighborhoods. I don't care what religion it is. I am so indifferent here. And again, I can't even tell you how much I love God. Every time somebody sends me something, a quote from the Bible, it could be a quote from the Quran. I read it, I pray, I thank God. Because anything that brings me closer to God, I'm happy with. And by the way, 90% of the world is facing east. Everyone's saying Muslim, Christian, Jewish. Label, label, label. More divide, yeah? George Carlin was right. That's all it does. It just separates us into categories. You're over there, I'm over here, they're over there. What's the point? 90% of us, the overwhelming majority of the world, believes in intelligent design, believes in a God. You want to say you're Christian, you want to say you're Catholic, you want to say you're Jewish, you're Muslim. The only thing separating us, or differentiating us rather, are customs. We all believe in God. Yet we want to say, no, your God's wrong, my God's right. You don't believe in Jesus, I believe in Jesus. Leave it up to God, right? Did God ever want us to judge people? No. He wants us to be civil. He wants us to be fair. Above all, he wants us to have acceptance, right? Love. God is love. If we forget anything else, we should retreat to that. God is love. Do I want to take this away from Muslims? No. But this has been an extremely hot topic. And I think everybody should talk about it. I think everybody should address every one of these topics, right? We should stay engaged. It's our country, right? We want to be progressive. We want to do good. We want to lead the way for future generations. We only have such a short time here. I would rather that prayer generally stay within church, mosques, synagogues, temples, homes, or religious property. And I would apply that principle to Christianity or any other religion. I don't want a pastor broadcasting a Christian sermon through speakers into everybody's apartment every morning. But then there's the bigger question people are afraid to ask. If America's religious makeup changed dramatically, would American culture eventually change with it? Of course, culture changes when populations change. That happened throughout human history. Food changes, language changes, holidays change, architecture changes, music changes, social norms change, and religious traditions will become more or less visible. Now, that's not automatically good or bad. That's how culture works. And oh, by the way, you know what else we're going to get in our society? More ubiquitous than anything else? Physical AI. We're going to have a ton of robots running all around here. What do you think that's going to do to our culture? It's probably going to make us more isolationist. I don't know. And you can take that thought further. What would happen to attitudes about how women dress? What about alcohol? What about sexuality? What about marriage? What about the relationship between religion and government? Would any of those things change if America's religious makeup became dramatically different? Probably. England isn't what it is today versus 200 years ago. Neither is the United States. Neither is China. Neither is Australia. Neither is Nigeria. Those are legitimate questions about culture. What happens when the times change? What happens when the people change? But I don't want to take those questions and turn them into a claim that America is somehow inevitably becoming a Muslim country, because the numbers don't support that. There is currently no demographic evidence that America is heading toward becoming a Muslim majority country. The latest estimate is that Muslims would represent about 2.1% of the American population in 2050, roughly 8 million people. That's enough for Islam to become a more visible part of American life. It's nowhere near remotely close to a majority. So this fear-mongering tactic that our president, including multiple politicians, will take part in is nonsense, and it's wrong. It is wrong. Xenophobia is wrong. There ain't nothing else to say about that. You put that shit aside, okay? Again, we all have stereotypes. We all have crazy ass thoughts that go up in here. Okay? You can conjure up anything. This imagination is wild. You thwart that thought because you know it is wrong. Because ultimately, this is what guides your moral compass, the heart. And if this is black, we got another problem. But for the overwhelming majority of us, 99.999% of us, we love, we have good hearts. We have good moral compasses. You follow that. You don't follow these insane thoughts over here. We all have them. We have to admit that. That's the first part, in my opinion. You put them aside because you know that they are false. They are because of everything that you're taking in from the media, bullshit that you hear from people on the street, whatever it is. Fear-mongering, xenophobia, get it out of here. It is bullshit. We know how to live with civility. We know how to live in peace and harmony. It's usually the leaders of this world that pit us against one another. We need to refuse that. That is not what God wants, and it is certainly not what the public wants. So I'm not creating some slippery slope argument where we go from a call to prayer in Dearborn, Michigan, to Islamic law across America. It's not going to happen. So just dismiss that idea. But the underlying cultural question is still legitimate. As America becomes more religiously and culturally diverse, what traditions should change, what traditions should remain, and where should accommodation end? Because I also don't believe diversity means a country has to erase everything that existed before. We can welcome Muslims without becoming Muslim. We can welcome Hindus without becoming Hindu. We can welcome atheists without becoming an atheist country. And Christians don't need, and Christians certainly don't get to impose Christianity on everybody else either. That's the American experiment, isn't it? We're trying to take people from practically every culture, ethnicity, religion on earth and somehow build one society where everybody retains enormous religious freedom, enormous individual freedom. We are a melting pot. And that's probably the most beautiful thing about this country. And maybe that's exactly why I think we should be more careful about pushing religion into shared public space, not less. Your freedom to worship should be enormous. You have the right to pray indoors. You have the right to pray inside of a temple, a mosque, a church. But the person living next door to you also has the freedom not to participate in your religion. And that's why this debate is so interesting to me, because I loved hearing the call to prayer in Morocco. I prayed when I heard it. But do I want to hear it broadcast throughout New York every day? I don't think I do. And maybe church bells expose a contradiction in my position. Or maybe there's a legitimate difference between respecting America's long-standing historical traditions and allowing organized prayer to expand through loudspeakers into shared public spaces. I don't think this question has an easy answer. But this is where I settle on it. Your right to pray? Absolutely. Your right to practice your religion? Absolutely. Your right to make everyone around you listen to your religion through a loudspeaker? That's where I have a problem. I can't accept that because I'm thinking about everyone else. I'm not just thinking about the Christians. I'm not just thinking about the Jews. This isn't a Muslim thing. I'm talking about, should we have prayer outdoors? Do I have a legitimate problem with it? No. But do I think it's healthy for our discourse? Do I think it's healthy for our public square? Does it help or hurt our dynamic? Does it divide us more or does it bring us closer together? If no one else is doing it, why would we allow anyone else to do it? And again, I would say the exact same thing if that loudspeaker were coming from my own church. I would say this is unacceptable. I do not agree with this at all. It's not beautiful. It's not nice. It's wrong. Not here in America. You just can't do it here in America. So what are your thoughts on this? Does religious freedom mean accepting public calls to prayer, or should organized religious broadcasts, Christian, Muslim, or otherwise, stay inside places of worship? That's the debate. All right, next topic. Ow, 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 ow. Oh, shit, it's getting hot in here. It's getting hot in here, so hot, and take off all my clothes. Getting so hot, I gotta take my clothes off. It's getting hot in here, so hot in here. Oh, no, no, no. All right. Who holds political power in America? Who actually holds the power as far as race is concerned? And does our government resemble the population it represents? We hear constantly that certain groups are underrepresented while others hold a disproportionate amount of power. But I wanted to see the actual numbers. About 14% of the country is Black, roughly 20% is Latino or of Latin American descent, and approximately 58% is non-Hispanic white. The white distinction, that white distinction is important because Latino is an ethnicity, not a race. Millions of Latinos also identify racially as white, Black, or multiracial. These categories don't fit perfectly into three separate boxes, but this still gives us a useful comparison. So let's take a look at some of the numbers. US population, this is the breakdown. 14% are Black, 20% are Latino, 58% non-Hispanic white. Now look down the list here. See if the numbers add up. We're going to introduce another visual in just a second. So for Blacks, the House of Representatives, 14%. It aligns with the population. US Senate, 5%. There's only 100 senators. Federal judges, 12%. That's close to 14%. State governors, there's only 50 of them, 2%. Latinos, US population, 20%. House of Representatives, 11%. US Senate, 6%. Federal judges, 8%. State governors, 2%. Non-Hispanic white. US population, 58%. House of Representatives, 72%. Senate, 84%. Federal judges, 74%. State governors, 94%. So you could see that it's somewhat skewed, right? But not really. I ain't gonna make a stink about this. Do we need more representation? Yeah, I would say so. Maybe you could give a little bit more to the Blacks and Latinos. But overall, I think we're making a big stink about this. I think it's fairly even, in my opinion. Just look at the numbers. Right down the list. It's close enough. What, do you want it to be perfect? That's impossible. That's not going to happen. Now let's take a look at it with a bar chart. I think this tells the story. Look at that. Black right down there. 14%. You see the blue right across. You could draw a straight line. Latinos, you could essentially draw a straight line. Again, I think they need more representation, maybe coming from the non-Hispanic white, right? We should take a little from them, add it to the Latinos. I think everybody's happy. Everybody's having a party. Full representation. So that's how the numbers add up. So what does this tell us? My first reaction is that the House is not as racially unrepresentative as I expected, especially for Black Americans. Is every group represented perfectly? No. Latinos have the clearest numerical gap. They make up approximately 1/5 of the country, but only about 1/10 of the House and 6% of the Senate. White Americans remain overrepresented in every institution on this chart, particularly the Senate and governor's office. But I also don't think every difference automatically proves that the system is blocking people because of their race. The Senate only has 100 members serving 6-year terms. Governors are elected individually in 50 separate states. Federal judges can remain on the bench for decades. Those institutions naturally change more slowly than the country's population. Geography matters as well. Latinos may represent 20% of the national population, but they are heavily concentrated in states including California, Texas, Florida, Arizona, and New Mexico. Every state still receives exactly 2 state senators, whether it has 600,000 residents or nearly 40 million. That structure can create underrepresentation nationally without requiring voters to reject Latino candidates individually. We also have to distinguish representation from outcomes. Having the same percentage of Black lawmakers as Black residents doesn't automatically mean racial inequality has disappeared. It tells us who occupies the seats, not whether communities have equal wealth, education, safety, opportunity, or influence over policy. At the same time, an unequal percentage does not automatically prove discrimination. You still have to examine who ran, who voted, where the population lives, and whether genuine barriers prevented qualified candidates from competing. But this is a flashpoint in 2026. This is a point of inspection, if you will, where we stand as far as our representation in accordance with our demographics. But I don't believe that every institution needs to match the country down to the decimal point. Elections involve individual candidates, not racial quotas. But if a group remains at 20% of the population and only 6% of the Senate for decades, it is reasonable to ask why. Is the gap narrowing naturally as younger generations enter politics? Maybe. We have to look at that pattern. Is it caused by geography and the structure of the Senate? Possibly. Again, something that we would have to analyze. Are fewer candidates from different demographics entering the political pipeline? It's always been dominated by non-Hispanic whites. But are we doing enough to empower Latinos and Blacks to enter the political sphere? And are there still barriers that we're failing to identify? Now, the graph doesn't prove that everything is fair, and it doesn't prove that everything is rigged. It shows that the answer depends on where we look. The House is relatively close. The Senate and governorships are not. Black representation has made considerable progress, particularly in the House and federal judiciary. Latino representation still has substantially more ground to cover, but those are the numbers. Now, the real question is what we believe fair representation should actually look like. And yes, I want to make sure that I look at our Congress and I want to make sure that I see enough Black people, that I see enough Spanish people, enough Latinos. I want to see white people represent whites. It's not like they're just on your side, but more diversity is better. A lot of people like to throw out this idea behind DEI. You know what DEI is? You know what affirmative action is? It's not only trying to level out the opportunities and give equity their fair share to everyone. It's also the wisest and most prudent thing to do. If I'm a Fortune 500 CEO, do you know what I'm going to do with my board of directors? Do you know what I'm going to do with my entire team? I want that group to represent who we're selling to, which is the United Nations. I want one white, one Black, females, males, Spanish. I want people from all over the world sitting on my board, because that gives you different perspectives. Now, could you get away with steering your committee with all white folk or all black folk or all Spanish folk? Sure. Is it the wisest approach? No. And I think any Fortune 500 CEO would tell you as such. They would say, no. I want a woman on this board. I got to actually go and get myself a woman. I want a black person on this board. I got to go and get that person. That's what DEI is. There's nothing really wrong with it, right? People just don't want to be told what to do. But again, if this is a representative democracy, you want to see some of the same faces. Now, of course, you got to get down to the values, right? Are they pushing out laws and legislating and steering this country with the right values that reflect what the public wants? That's most important. However, you want to be able to look at Congress and say, okay, there's my face right there. I see representation. Personally, I'm Arab, right? I'm born and raised in New York, but my blood is Egyptian. And yeah, I think it would be smart to have some Arabs in Congress. Why? Because it's just better. Diversity is better. It's better when you're serving such a diverse public, such a diverse constituency like the one that we have. It just makes sense to me. And again, I don't think any leader worth their salt would disagree with that. You look at virtually any board out there for any one of these super successful companies, NVIDIA, Google, Meta, they're probably going to have diversity sitting on those boards. You know why? Not because they have a quota, because they know it makes sense, because they know it's going to set them up for the best shot at success. I don't give a shit about DEI. I don't give a shit about affirmative action. If I'm in a leadership position, oh yeah, I want a woman, I want a black person, I want a Spanish person, I want a Chinese person, I want a Nigerian, I want a Danish person, I want a Brazilian. Yeah, I want the whole world represented, not only on my board of directors, but on my executive team and all the way down the pyramid. The more diverse you are, the better. All right, next topic. All right. Trump is changing America's childhood vaccine policy. And before you tell me vaccines are completely safe or vaccines are completely dangerous, I have questions for both sides. Forget COVID for a minute. That was a new vaccine during an emergency period. And a lot of people came out of that period not trusting our public health institutions. But now we're talking about vaccines we've been giving kids for decades: measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis. Trump's administration is cutting the number of vaccines universally recommended for children from 17 to 11. He also wants to separate MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella into individual vaccines. Those individual vaccines aren't even currently available in America. So my first question is, why? Why would we do such a thing? And I hope he listened to medical experts here. I'm assuming he did. However, is there bias involved here? You know that they wanted less government involvement as far as it comes to medical recommendations, and that's what we're getting. That's why he put RFK Jr. in his post. Is separating these vaccines going to make it safer? If it is, show us the evidence. Because let's look at measles. Before the vaccine, an estimated 3 to 4 million Americans got measles every year. About 48,000 were hospitalized, roughly 400 to 500 died. Then widespread vaccination happened, and by the year 2000, measles was eliminated as a disease continuously spreading inside the United States. That's pretty hard to ignore. And this is where herd immunity matters. Measles is insanely contagious. If you're susceptible and exposed, as many as 9 out of 10 people can become infected. You generally need about 95% immunity in a community to stop sustained outbreaks. So you might say, it's my kid. If I don't vaccinate them, that's my risk. Okay. But measles doesn't stay in your house. Your decision can affect newborns, immunocompromised people, and people who can't be vaccinated. That's where individual freedom and public health collide. Now let's go the other direction. Big Pharma makes money from vaccines. Of course they do. And we know most people will look at Big Pharma and say that they are evil, not only for the prices that they provide, but also the dependence that they put, the dependence that they push on us for these drugs. Merck isn't a charity, Pfizer isn't a charity. So follow the money. Look at pharmaceutical lobbying. Look at the conflicts of interest. Look at vaccine injuries. Look at whether manufacturers have enough liability, and ask all those questions. But a pharmaceutical company making money doesn't prove its product doesn't work. If Big Pharma is the explanation for the measles vaccine, then explain why 3 to 4 million Americans used to get measles every year and now they don't. That's the evidence that you just can't ignore. That's science, right? And this is where I think we have a problem when it comes to discourse on this topic. It's because sometimes people choose to listen to science and sometimes they don't. And that's okay, but there's no logic here, right? To say that these vaccines don't work is false. They do work. Unless you're just saying that the entire scientific industry is lying. And I don't think anyone's going to agree with you on that. You're going to have, I would say, a small group of conspiracy theorists. I don't think anybody likes Big Pharma. However, the science looks to be undeniable. And oh, by the way, the Trump administration, if you're following them and you just want to support Trump, that's not what RFK Jr. is saying. That's not what Trump is saying. And that's not what any of the medical experts are saying. They're not saying that we should do away with these vaccines. They're saying that they're lowering the recommendation from 17 to 11. However, them lowering the recommendation will certainly have implications, because then many people will say, well, our government doesn't even trust them. That's why they're recommended and they're not mandated. Then, of course, there's natural immunity. Of course, natural immunity works. There's just one problem with that. You have to get the disease first. That's the entire trade-off. Now, many people are going to ask, why the hell does a newborn need a hepatitis B vaccine? Because most of us associate hepatitis B with sex or needles. But an infected mother can transmit hepatitis B during childbirth, and infection in a newborn has a very high chance of becoming chronic and potentially causing serious liver disease decades later. So Trump's side is asking, why vaccinate every baby instead of identifying the babies actually at risk? Fair question, but then you have to ask, what happens when we don't know who's at risk? That's the trade-off. And then there's RFK Jr. If we're going to investigate Big Pharma's money, we have to investigate his money too. Kennedy previously had a financial interest connected to the vaccine litigation and later transferred that interest to his son. That does not prove corruption, but if we're going to question pharmaceutical conflicts, we should question conflicts on the other side too. You don't think that the White House has some type of agenda here? You think that they're just pushing this out? You know how big a deal this is? When you do something with Big Pharma, I mean, Big Pharma is bringing in an estimated $500 billion a year in revenue. You think the White House is just going to announce something like this and it would just be deemed innocuous by Big Pharma? You think they're not lobbying? They always have. I mean, seriously, either way, you kind of got to be a skeptic. Again, it's not healthy to be a complete cynic, but you do have to ask some questions here. Why now? Do you think Big Pharma is just going to lie down and take something like this? You know this isn't good for them, right? And maybe they're just willing to make the concession because they're getting a trade-off elsewhere that we don't know about. Again, I don't want to be a cynic here, but you don't just touch Big Pharma's money. They have never done that, and I don't expect them to start. And I don't expect them to start anytime soon. So then what are the standards here? I'm not blindly going to trust Pfizer or the CDC or RFK Jr. And I'm certainly not going to blindly trust Donald Trump. Show me the evidence. Has the public been shown the science behind this? If pharmaceutical companies tell us we need a vaccine, prove it. If the government tells us it's safe, show us. And if Trump and RFK Jr. tell us we've been giving our children too many vaccines, they have to prove that too. We can't just blindly accept any of this. We have to do our own research and come to our own conclusions. This is our kids. Just because the government says one thing versus the other, you can't just accept that. You got to do your own research. Even if schools mandate these vaccines, you have to do your own research as a parent, including for yourself. What happened with COVID was a rush job. That's why so many people were skeptical because of it. I got 3 shots. Why? Because I wanted to get on a plane. And I probably could have lied about it, but I didn't. But as far as I can see here with this vaccine story, and this is huge news, we got to question everyone involved. Big Pharma, what are you getting out of this? Government, what are you getting out of this? And the scientists and the medical world, why are you accepting this? Let's not act like they're victims here. We need to question everybody. This is our health. And ultimately, this could just induce more pandemics. Because here's the kicker. Once vaccination rates fall enough, whether you're alive to see it or not, we don't have to debate whether those diseases can come back. We're going to find out. So whether that's 20, 50, 100 years from now, eventually history will tell the story. Vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. All right. Thanks for watching. See you next time.